This week or so I've been thinking a lot about inclusion, about how we serve the needs of everyone, from anyone who is like us to anyone who couldn't be more different. People on the margins of church life as well as anyone for whom church is a big part of life. Not necessarily the people we see every day, but the people we don't see, the people that we can be blind to, either accidentally, through our own ignorance, or intentionally. And this past week my eyes have been opened in lots of ways. It all began with a funeral visit. Joseph had been born with severe learning difficulties and was not expected to survive beyond 30, but he surprised everyone by living well into his 60s. He lived on an ordinary street in his own house, not shut away in an institution, but living as independently as possible, with the help of caregivers and as part of a community in a real home. Because of his learning difficulty, he couldn't retain much and often spoke by repeating what others told him. Yet he knew about baby Jesus and Christmas, and believed in a heaven and an afterlife. Perhaps Joseph saw and understood something that we can be blind to, or too preoccupied to see. The grace of God is all around us. Shortly after meeting Joseph's family and hearing about him, I then went on to visit an infant school in the parish. There was a special event on, the opening of an inclusion centre for young children with severe learning difficulties. Whilst I was there, I met some of the families of the children who use the centre. One parent told me that she never thought her son would be able to attend the mainstream school. And yet, there he was, with his support worker, playing in the playground, kicking a ball around, and being closely watched and cared for. The day after that, I went to a women's conference in Guildhall, one of the biggest women's conferences in Europe. But I was saddened by what I saw happening outside the Guildhall on my way home. A marginal group had gathered, people who hadn't felt included or counted as women. Scenes of quiet, peaceful protest from members of the trans community. And there was a placard which read, "I am who I say I am." That same day in the evening I was at the lights installation at St. Mary's, showcasing the voices of refugees, telling their stories to music and light, shining a light on things and people that we might not want to look at or acknowledge. And I mention all of these things because our gospel story about blind Bartimaeus inspires us to consider our own ministry too, and treatment of those who are different from us. In the gospel stories, time and again, we see how Jesus acts to gather people into God's kingdom of love and inclusion, and today is no exception to that rule. Yet the people who kept themselves closest to Jesus often acted to keep others on the outside. Remember in that story how many had sternly ordered Bartimaeus to be quiet. It's not the first time that the people who surrounded Jesus had tried to silence someone different to them. But Bartimaeus, the outsider, was heard by God. Miracles are events which bring people from darkness into light. A miracle is the activity of God in a place in time. And in our gospel we have a miracle. But God is active all around us, in the street where the deceased man Joseph lived, in the infant school where every child is included, in the trans community crying out to not be pushed to the margins of our society, in the by the art installation at Mary's. Our task today is to think about how we can play our part in bringing each other from darkness into light. But first we need to be unblinded ourselves. And we begin where we always begin, by trying to follow Jesus closely, by seeking to receive him more deeply, by trial and error, by asking God to remove our blindness to the value and beauty of others regardless of age, ability, gender, sexuality. Until our table is for everyone, we haven't heard the gospel message. Until we are inclusive Christians capable of embodying the radical love of Christ, our table is unfinished, and we are not yet formed in Christ. That, I suspect, is a lifelong journey.